Hi, everyone. I'm Jamil Maladina from the Google Play team. Glad you could all stick around for the end. We've got a really fun session here for you, anchoring the end of the session. To my left is Mike Festa, who is the director of Wayfair Next, and Tatsuo Nomura, who is the senior product manager on Pokemon GO from Niantic. And that kind of is the official titles, but of course, there's so much more to what you actually do. I'm wondering if you can give us a little bit of a background about how you rode to get here and what it is that you're actually doing, starting with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for having us.
Sure.
So I work at Wayfair. We sell furniture online. And I created a team called Wayfair Next. It's essentially the R&D department internally at Wayfair. And we were looking at cutting-edge technologies like Tango and Daydream for AR and VR. And I think it's a great fit because we're selling products online. We don't have a store. You can't come in and see the couch and sit on it. But this is, I think, one of the next best things that we can offer. And so I started my team about a year ago. It was kind of coming off of a successful hackathon using the Google Tango development kit. And people internally got excited about it and said, let's make a team and make this an important endeavor for us.
But taking it a little bit further back in time, how did you get inspired with AR? What was it that was interesting that got you on that track to even present it in the hackathon?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in AR and VR as long as I can remember, since being a kid and seeing all these promises of VR and virtual worlds, and the Matrix is a big inspiration for me. And I feel like I've been following the technology for a long time. I was one of the early founders or backers of Oculus before they did a Kickstarter, and I've been playing with these types of technologies. So when I saw the Tango video, I naturally signed up immediately, and I had a Tango dev kit, but I hadn't had the opportunity to really take the time out of my personal life and actually write an app or do something interesting with it, even though I really wanted to. And so then the Wayfair hackathon came up, and I said, I know just the thing I'm going to do, and that's use this AR technology to kind of show how it can apply to what we do and sell furniture.
Makes sense. Tatsuo, how about you? What's your story?
I studied in Japan. I went to grad school in Japan, and after graduated, I joined Google Japan. And then I spent about a year there as a software engineer. Then I moved to US to Google headquarters in Mountain View. And I joined Google Mobile Maps team. And then after that, I joined this internal startup called Niantic Labs, which later became Niantic. That's how I got involved.
Now, you had the good fortune to become involved with a company that was already working in AR. Mike, your situation is probably more familiar to a lot of the folks in the audience, where you're working with a company that has a business on Google Play, but you wanted to bring AR to the product. How did you, so you had the successful hackathon. How did you go about working with your management to develop an AR product?
Yeah, absolutely. So it can be a tough sell for a product that doesn't exist, that may never exist, that's out there in this kind of prototype form. But I think what really sold it internally was that the key benefit, or the differentiator between this technology and what we have currently, was so profound that it really enabled the shopping experience at home to be better than at the store. So when you think about, I want to buy a new couch, you get to measure the space, you get to figure out how it's going to fit in your home, then you get to go to the store, you get to see the product, imagine it in your space. And oftentimes you go to a furniture store and it's huge ceilings, and you get the big spaced out things, and the giant couch looks small until you get it in your home, and then you realize it's too big. So I thought that was a great use case for us to say, here's the exact product in your space, fitting exactly as it needs to fit. And I think the long-term vision for that is that this technology is going to be in every phone in the next 5 years, let's say. And we want to be ahead of the curve. We want to start producing 3D models and 3D content so that by the time everybody actually has the technology, our entire catalog is covered.
That makes sense. A lot of people hesitate to buy furniture online. I actually did buy a couch on Wayfair, but I can imagine a lot of people would kind of stumble through that, not being able to place it in their home.
Right, and it's only about 7% of furniture sales that happen online today. It's one of the last remaining brick and mortar businesses that is still not going to online, where we've seen, the last decade or even almost 2 decades of more and more consumer goods going online, especially things that you don't necessarily need to see or touch. Like if you need to order batteries or paper towels, it's easy to just buy those on Amazon because you know exactly what you're getting, especially repeat purchases like that. With furniture, it's a little different. It's very unique, it's personal, you care about how it looks. And I think one of the interesting things that Wayfair offers is a huge selection. So we have over 7 million products, and any taste and style that you can think of, we have that product online. Versus the traditional store where you go in and what you see is what you get. Basically, there's a limited amount of space you can put the product in. Yet it's only 7% right now, and I think part of the barrier is that you want to see exactly how it's going to look in your space. And then you want to be able to sit on and touch it. And that's another even more future-facing technology. But I feel like, one win at a time, and getting the AR, use case of like, this is how it's going to look, is only going to accelerate that shift to online.
So opening up that larger market was something that you kind of identified. Now, Tatsuo, one of the things that you've been working on, so granted Niantic was already into AR, but working with Pokemon was something that you already had an experience with. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, right. So as I explained, I was working for Google Maps team before joining Niantic, and every year we will do this April Fool's projects. I mean, it's more like a joke thing. In 2012, we did this thing called Google Maps 8-bit. Basically, we turned the whole map into a classic video game, Nintendo theme. That was my project, and that went pretty well, and everybody loved it. Since then, people started to ask me to do April Fools, and the following year, we did another one. It's called Google Maps Treasure Mode. So basically, we turn the map now this to a treasure map looking, and we hid like monsters and treasures for people to look for. And then the following year, that's when I started working on Google Maps Mobile, the Android Maps. And we were talking about what to do right for the April Fools.
Yeah.
And I came up with this idea to, what if I had the Pokemon on the maps? I played a lot of video games growing up. Of course, Pokemon, Street Fighter, Final Fantasy, all these games. And every year I was thinking in the terms of gaming. So that year I came up with the idea of doing Pokemon. And we did this on the Google Maps. And that got generated a quite big buzz. And at the same time, there was this internal startup called Niantic Labs within Google that John Hanke was leading. And Niantic had a product, still has the product called Ingress, which is an AR game where you go outside to play. And he contacted me after the April Fools. He asked, Tatsuo, do you think we can do something with Pokemon? Pokemon in the real world, whether that will make sense. And of course, right, because I played the game when I was little, I watched all the anime, all the movies, right? I basically was imagining myself, fans have this fantasy that I am the Ash and going out to catch them all. So that immediately, clicked. So I took John and to go to Japan to meet the Pokemon people. There's a company called the Pokemon Company. They own the IP. So we went there, we introduced Ingress and the concept of real-world gaming, and they very much love the idea as well. That's how we started. We decided to do this together. It started the project.
The natural fit seems to be a really common characteristic here, because the original Pokemon game has you finding Pokemon in the world and capturing them, and of course, placing furniture in your home is what you naturally want to do. It seems that having that fit to what people want to do was a really kind of driving factor, as opposed to the technology for the technology's sake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think companies that want to embrace AR just for the flash or for the buzz, they might have some initial interest or success, and I think that's great and exciting to get out there and experiment with it. But at the end of the day, you have to make sure you're answering a core business need as well. It's how can this technology make our offering better to the company, or how can we make our gameplay more engaging or interesting? And as long as you're solving those problems, then I think you'll be successful in the long run.
Great. So
Yeah, I mean, totally. So I think for Niantic, our mission is adventures on foot with others. So what we are really trying to do is not necessarily this gimmicky AR thing. What we're trying to do is to bring people to outside, to explore, to exercise, to communicate with other people. That's our core value, and we achieved that by using this AR that happened to be, the right timing and right fit for the IP and everything.
So it sounds like you're more about enriching the lives of the people playing and using the apps. I mean, it's providing something. The technology is simply a tool, but what you're actually trying to do is enrich their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah,
Cool.
definitely.
So, since you're both the product owners of your respective app and game, I'm wondering if we could have a little bit of a discussion about what the design and production and development challenges were. So let's take design first. So was there something about your hypothesis of the design of each of your products that you found along the way, you needed to change, or that you learned in the process of creating needed to be changed in terms of the design?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we like to do now is open office hours. So the end of the week on Fridays from 3 to 5, we invite people throughout the company. We have 3,000 employees in Boston to just come up and play around and see what we're doing. And that's been great user testing because we can get this hands-on test, especially with Tango, where it's something we can't just send out to people's devices. We actually have to see them, interact with them, and give them the device. But getting outside of engineering and getting people that are working with products and they're shopping at home and they're organizing these categories, getting them to use the app was really rewarding and interesting. And I think we iterated a lot on the UI and the design based on those conversations and that feedback, and working with people, just giving them the device and not saying anything, just saying go use it. Seeing where the pitfalls were, what gestures worked. Like, for example, we had a 2-finger rotation thing first. So you swipe left and right to rotate the product. No one could figure that out. And so we realized everyone was trying to do the circle rotate, even though it didn't necessarily match what we were thinking. And when we switched to that, we found that people naturally got it a lot faster. So little things like that, I think the user testing goes a long way.
Right on.
Yeah.
Tatsuo?
I guess for us, one of the big things is when we started the project, we thought we can just have the Pokemon running around, on the map.
Yeah.
We tried it. Obviously, it didn't work because I have to, as a player, running around chasing Pokemon. It just doesn't work in the real world. That's something we found out. But in terms of design, because it's a game, we expect people to play in the outside. We really tried hard to make the all gestures or UI reachable from your thumb. That's why the Pokemon game, you've opened it, most of the major tasks you can accomplish by just one finger. That's something we've tried really hard. And with that, there's one unique gesture in our game where you can use one finger to rotate the map. Even internally, we had some debate. Some people were thinking that is not something people used to. Maybe we should not do it. But after implemented and tested with various people, everybody liked it. And we decided to do that. So there are a lot of, like what you said, trial and error during the process.
But in your case, though, it seemed like there was quite a bit more involved with the throw mechanic. So, I mean, people of all ages, kids, my parents, I mean, everyone seems to naturally get that and get a lot of thrill out of that. But it wasn't a very simple thing, right?
Right, yeah. That part actually was pretty hard. Even if you think it's just, flicking your finger, how hard that is. But it took, I think we did 3 or 4 iterations just to get it right, because, on the phone, different people have different phone size and have different resolution. So to make it work across the devices, that was very challenging. I think we can still improve it, but one of the things it really was difficult is the rate of the sampling. We're using a Unity in our app. The Unity sampler is has some room for improvement. So we had to work around it to make sure that when you flick, it's a 2D mapping to 3D. So make it sure that you feel like you are doing it right. So.
Okay. Now, You're working with Tango for the first time. AR is still a relatively new technology. Did you encounter any impact to your production schedule or to your budget in kind of working through some of the kinks of AR?
I don't know that we had. I mean, our team's a little bit unique in the sense that we're like a dedicated R&D team. So it's kind of expected that we're going to be hacking things together and working with teams like Google, for example, was working closely with us to identify issues for like the Tango core and things that the device was doing at a lower level. And so that was, I think, for us going into it, kind of expected. We weren't looking for this perfect out-of-the-box solution. It was more like, okay, we're going to be investing R&D to cutting-edge tech. So, one of the things that comes with that is this kind of unknown around like development time, or in general as an engineer, like I find that a lot of times it's really hard to estimate how long a particular task is going to take, because you might come to a quick conclusion or something might just work. And that's awesome, but a lot of times it doesn't, and then you have to kind of like investigate and pick and poke and figure out why something that isn't working, and then eventually you get to your solution, and it's great to be an engineer, it's fun to get that eureka moment, but there's a lot of time where there's that kind of unknown window of, is this going to work? Am I doing the right thing? Is this our code, or is this Google's code? Is this a device problem? And I think a lot of that stuff has been ironed out at this point, which is great. But over the last, let's say 8 months or so, while we were doing the core development, it was one of those things that, we just kind of kept like trial and error, see what worked, and try to make changes and improvements. And now it's like super solid, so it's been great.
What would you recommend to people developing AR with Tango? What would you suggest that they plan for in that core development window?
I think the first thing to do is to actually just get a device in your hands in your office and start showing people some of the existing apps that are out there. And then with that device, have your developers, we use Unity. I think a lot of companies do. These guys are using Unity as well. Try the Unity toolkit, because Google provides like a great starting point in Unity where you can basically plug in your device, load up the sample apps, make some changes. So for my hackathon, that's essentially what I did. I used the Google AR code, and I actually spent more time on my hackathon just drawing and modeling the products so that they looked good than actually worrying about the room mapping and the AR portion of it. Unity just gives you a camera that follows the device as you move it around. So I think that's the great way to get into it. Just experiment with it, and if you feel like there's a match for the technology, then think about, okay, what's the core products that we're going to develop? And it's not that unlike developing for Android or developing for gaming in terms of the technology, because Google handles most of the underlying learning portion of it for you.
Right on. Tatsuo, what about you? Were there any stumbling blocks?
Let's see. So because we started as Niantic is always focusing on AR, so it's not like bringing in AR will affect us. We started as an AR, so but I can talk about a little more about the specifics. Like for example, the camera overlay, you have the Pikachu standing in front of the camera and react to your gyro. That is actually not that hard, right? It's pretty rudimentary. So you just put your object there. Of course, we have to do some tuning to make sure it looks good and works, depending on what size of the Pokemon it looks correct and everything. But that part wasn't very hard. But the another major component of the Pokemon Go is these Pokestops and gyms. Those are real world locations. Like probably this one. There are a lot of Pokestops around this area as well. We collected all these data for the past 3-4 years when we did with Ingress. So Ingress users will submit this what we call portal data. We had when we started Pokemon Go, we already had multi-million locations. That's something I think we took a long time to build up, but once we have it, that is the foundation we had to in order to build Pokemon Go.
I think that brings up an interesting point, and that's around the content. And so the development of the app is one thing, but the development of the content, can also make or break your business model or your plan. And that's one of the things we found at Wayfair. We sell 7 million products, as I mentioned, and we started this without having really any 3D models. Like for my hackathon, I was drawing stuff in the office. And one of the reasons that my team was able to get created was because internally we had discovered that for our photo studio, we're basically taking in products, setting them up nicely, taking a picture. And that whole process was relatively slow and expensive. Internally, one of our co-founders was working on a new project to basically make 3D models of the products for use in 3D renderings. So they came up with this business use case that, oh, we can, for a fraction of the cost, render out a product and then have that 3D product for use in the future for whatever other environment we want to pull it into for these photorealistic catalog shoots. So because they were creating the 3D content for that, it enabled my team to basically say, oh, we have 3D models, now we can do AR. But without 3D content, in our case, we wouldn't have really had anything. And so making the app is one thing, but supporting it with content is in some cases, the larger challenge.
Was that an internally developed 3D modeler?
So what we did is ended up, we were using various outsourcing opportunities, and now we're partnering with different companies that specialize in 3D content production.
Great.
And so on average, it costs about $25 for us to model a 3D product. And it cost savings over the photography, but my team's also developing a 3D scanning technology that I think will further drive down costs and ultimately push that technology into the hands of our suppliers and vendors that have the products in their facilities, and they can do that for us. So I think ultimately, when we think of AR and VR, a lot of it's going to be about the content, and people need to think about the 3D aspect of the content. It's like a lot of ways this is like the web in the early days when you wanted to start selling stuff online. It's like, oh, what do I need to sell a product on the internet? I need a picture, I need some descriptions and pricing.
Sure.
And I think if we want to sell stuff in AR, we need a 3D model, and that's something that in some cases it exists because it's drawn in CAD. But in other use cases, it doesn't. Like in ours, for most of our products, they don't exist in 3D. So that's an additional challenge that we've been trying to address. And I think over the next few years, we'll see the technology get there so that almost every product is going to have a 3D representation. But in order to think about your application and what content you're going to need for it.
And it sounds like Unity was helpful to you as well in that process. Tatsuo, I'm wondering, were there any third-party tools or outsourcing resources or anything else happening around you guys that was helpful to you that you basically relied on in some capacity?
Yeah, so the 3D models, right? Like we had this 3D model from a Pokemon company because they already created these 700 more creatures.
Sure.
So we had that already. And in terms of tools, we use Unity, as I described before. And on the client side, we also developed our own plugin to render the map. And on top of that, on the back end, our servers use Google Cloud Engine, excuse me. Yeah, and that definitely enabled us to scale the game to the scale we have today. And the Google team has been really, really supportive to us. So yeah, that's been we've been grateful.
As have we. So actually, let's jump to that moment. So Tatsuo, your game comes out on a Friday without featuring, without anything. Walk us through what happened that day in your office.
Let's see. We launched the game in New Zealand and Australia first.
Yes.
So we didn't do any advertisement because we were worried that we'll get too much traffic. We wanted to expand it slowly to make sure our servers don't melt down. So we started in New Zealand, Australia. When you push the button on Google Play, it takes a couple minutes or actually longer, like an hour to propagate. And for people to find out, it will take a little longer. So when we just click on the button and we started monitoring the graph, and nothing happens, right, for a while. And we were like, are people, we became a little bit nervous watching the graph. But after a couple hours, we started to see the graph just going up and up and up. It doesn't stop, it just keep going up. And the next morning, we came to the office, and our engineering manager, I'm the product manager, our engineering manager announced that if we keep this rate, we're going to have a crazy number of users. And we were still, because the previous day, we were still looking at the graph, didn't move much, and we were a little skeptical. We're like, no, we're not going to get that many users. But during the day, the graph just keeps going up. And we started seeing online, like people started to do this event among themselves, like user-organized event in Sydney. We saw like 3,000 people just gathered, started, walking, crawling the city to catch Pokemon. And that's when I think we found out this is going a little crazy than what we expected. And that's the day, actually, the following day of the New Zealand, Australia launch, we launched in US. And after we launched it, I went back home from the office. And that was, I think, right after we clicked the button, I just went back home after monitoring for like 20 minutes. And I bumped into this person was holding the phone and doing this. And immediately I knew she was playing Pokemon Go. And I was so happy that I couldn't stop myself. I just walked into her, I asked, "Are you playing Pokemon Go?" I think I was probably looked really creepy because I was all smiles on my face and asking about her, how do you like it and how did you find it and everything. And a few days later, we saw the Pokemon crawl happen in San Francisco as well. There were like about 5,000 people gathered in the market, right, walking from what was a ferry building. I joined them as a user, and I see everyone was like cheering, and a lot of people had cosplay of Pokemon and the teams. That was really a happy moment of mine.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. We were talking about this backstage, we remember where we were when Pokemon exploded. And certainly, in terms of our relationship, we were, Maria Essig and I were noticing that everyone around us was playing it. We go out on the street, everyone is playing it. So that speaks to a very specific metric that is important to Niantic. So conventionally, we're always talking about installs and revenue, but there's also something else that is as important, if not more important, that you guys are tracking, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of downloads, the traditional stats, we I think in September we had like 500 million downloads. That is a great number. But there's a very unique number to us. Up to I think September, we had people walked total 4.6 billion kilometers. I don't know how many miles is that, but that's like from here to Pluto. It's a crazy number. So that number is very unique and I think important to us, because what we're trying to do is really, our core value is to take people outside, exercise, communicate, and be healthier, right? That's what we are trying to really do. The game is just a form of expression, if you will. And we also saw people, articles and hearing from other people, like we see people in a hospital, Pokemon Go used in hospital to help kids doing physical therapies, and we also see examples of kids suffering from autism were able to use Pokemon Go to communicate with even strangers. And that is really just, I feel very happy that I can, involved in can have some impact to someone's life in a positive way. And recently, I think it was Stanford and Microsoft, they published a study saying that Pokemon Go users, we extended Pokemon Go players' life expectancy by like 43 days.
Wow.
Nice.
So all those numbers, I think, are very important to us than the traditional stats.
It sounds like it has more to do with caring for the people playing your game than actually tracking conventional metrics. And in a funny way, this also maps to what we were talking about a little bit. It's not so much about the installs for you either, at least at an initial level. How are you guys measuring impact and success?
Yeah. So certainly we have like the long-term view that this technology is going to be there eventually, and we want to start building our 3D product catalog now. And the devices are just available now. So I have like one of the Lenovo devices here, so you can buy them now, and it'll be interesting to see what the adoption rate is like for that particular device. But no one's like expecting any ROI on what we've done so far. It's like, oh, this is an interesting experiment. And in the long term, we see the value. In the short term, it's been a lot more about publicity for the company and just showing that we're a forward-thinking tech company. Oftentimes, you think of Wayfair, you think of furniture, you think of the shopping experience, but at our core, we consider ourselves a tech company that happens to sell furniture. And so I think by doing this type of initiative, it's a great way for not only recruiting, but also community awareness that, oh, Wayfair is like a tech anchor in Boston, and these guys are doing some really interesting stuff. And then they learn about what we're doing, but then there's so many other interesting things internally that are going on, like in our data analytics and other teams that are building all kinds of crazy products. And this is kind of like a way to get people's attention and then show a lot of publicity for the company.
Sounds great. So I'm going to take a slightly different tack now. So both of your products are out. Let's pretend I'm Q, you're Picard. I have the ability to redo your mission. Let's go back to the beginning of your mission. What would you do differently now based on what you know having shipped your product?
Yeah, so for me personally, it goes back to that kind of like product model category. And now that we get the device out there, we have 10,000 products digitized. Seeing those products, it's like, oh, I wish we had 3D scanned all of them, for example. Like we're hand modeling the products. And that leaves a certain sense of artistic design, let's say, because basically the 3D modeler is looking at photo references, and they're not necessarily looking at the real product. They're just looking at photos of that product. Whereas the 3D scanning technology we're developing is like millimeter accurate, and looks photorealistic, and it's an actual great representation of the product. So I'm really excited about the future for that, but I wish we could have done that from the beginning rather than had this intermediary step of hand modeling all the products. But the scanning technology is something that's, it's constantly being developed. Google had an internal scanning company as well that I guess got the axe, unfortunately. But it's one of those technologies that's like really promising for the right product and then really challenging for the wrong product. Like this end table wouldn't scan well because it's all white, and when you try to reconstruct it, there's no good references to get it looking good. So we're working on techniques to kind of enhance the scanning process, but I wish we could have had that, like what we have today, a year ago, and what we're going to have in a year, 2 years ago, basically.
That ottoman with the geometric print really presented well.
Mm-hmm.
You're showing me.
Yeah, so that was a nice way. That was, again, it was a hand model, actually, so it was an artist that kind of put together what it looked like based on photos. And, not to discredit the modelers, they do a great job of making the products look amazing. But I feel like one of the big things we're trying to push is that super accurate. This thing is exactly how it fits in your space, and I think you lose some of the detail and the precision by doing the hand modeling approach versus the 3D scanning approach. So it's one of those things that we still don't have a perfect solution for. But I wish if I could go back in time, we had what we have now, or even better, to use that to build our 3D models from the beginning from 3D scan data.
Fair enough. Tatsuo?
So if you were Q, I would probably ask you to just give me a real Pikachu. But if the only thing you do is reset the time, I guess what we would have done is we probably would have increased our server capacity to begin with, like to the scale where what we have today. That's one thing we would do. But in terms of other things, I think we just launched the game like just a few months ago. We still planned a lot of things that we haven't even done or haven't even get to yet. So even I don't think there's different things I would do differently except the server portion.
Yeah, you're kind of beginning your adventure now, aren't you?
Yeah.
So last question. I want to kind of take our official hats off. Looking at it from the point of view of being pioneers in AR, where do you, Tatsuo and Mike, think AR is going, or where should it go, or what are the forces that need to change in order to bring about an AR future that you see as rewarding in like 5 years or so?
All right, yeah, I'll start. So this is something I've been thinking about like most of my life, and Google's been doing a lot of interesting innovation in the space of mapping the world. When you look at what's going on with like Google Earth, for example, I think with AR technology, we can bring that to interactive street level technology, essentially. So when we're scanning a space, we can present that space in, let's say, virtual reality, for example, and we can have this interaction in using AR with people that are in the same space, but in VR. So they could teleport there and be there with us. We can walk around the street together and look at different things or pull in different objects. So I think this idea of augmenting the world and creating a data set, a rich data set that lives on top of the real space that we're in, will enable us to connect better with people, both in the real sense, where we're both together looking at a thing or a landmark, but also with a third person that could be somewhere else in VR experiencing it with us. So I'm excited for that type of technology that's coming from the combination of 3D scanning, augmented reality, and virtual reality, and big data to be able to serve all of this data so that we can actually get to that point.
That sounds awesome. Tatsuo?
Yeah, I think the technology is just emerging right now. The Tango is coming out, and next year's, I guess there will be new devices coming out. But even going a lot further, eventually, and hopefully, I think the device will become so small that you don't know if someone is wearing it, and you'll be able to you won't be able to know whether this Pikachu is real or that's cute, messing with you. So, and I guess everyone around my age, or there are a lot of game developers here today, I think, imagined or had this fantasy that become a hero or do things that you won't be able to do in real life. But with the AR technology, you can become something, right? That it could be a Pokemon trainer. It could be. I'm not a big fan of a fast first-person shooter, but if you wanted, you can do that kind of gameplay as well. So I think there are a lot of interesting things we can do in terms of entertainment, gaming. But besides that, I'd like to wear my official hat a little bit. So what Niantic trying to do is really thinking about how we can improve people's lives. So not only doing these tricks, but using the AR, how we can actually augment people's lives, realities, if you will. So that's the area I think that part will evolve a lot as well. You can. If you can have this AR thing, like what we do, more advanced version of what we do today, the real world is actually very interesting. Even your neighborhood, what we try to do for you to discover these things, little things like a landmark in your neighborhood you never visited, or like a restaurant in a corner that nobody knows. With AR technology, you can guide people to those places, so that will actually augment the reality. I think that's where the AR technology should be or will be going to.
That's a beautiful vision. I think that's part of what everyone in AR has this opportunity to do, is to bring people together in the real world. I think that's probably the best note for us to end on. Thank you both for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.